Hey, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of DEI After 5. Now, you all know that we have kind of gone back and forth on, are we doing DEI? Are we not doing DEI? What does this look like? Everyone's still, I think, still trying to figure out where they're landing on this. But I think what everyone has agreed to, or those that want to continue doing the work in this space, have agreed to, has been we need to create environments where everyone can be successful, where everyone can thrive. And so, how do we make these workplaces more inclusive? And so today, my guest is Rolando Talbot, and we are going to talk about more inclusive workplaces, especially when we think about those that are um, working with people or have people within their staff and on their teams that are neurodiverse. And so, Rolando, I want to welcome you to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So, for folks who may not know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, actually, before I do that, I do
Yep.
want to just, if you allow me, I just want to take a minute, and I want to give you your flowers. That's something, if you're not familiar with that practice in our shared community, giving flowers is a tradition that recognizes and respects the work that is being done on behalf of the community. And so I just like to take a moment and say, I've been a fan for quite some time. I'm a subscriber to the YouTube channel. And I just appreciate the work that you do. I think, kind of post-pandemic, everybody had a podcast. Everybody was trying to put something online and things like that. And you look around today and you don't see them anymore, but yet
Right.
you're still here. And so I just want to give you your flowers, you and your team, for that. And I think just to go a little bit deeper, I also want to say I appreciate the intentionality behind what you do. Everything from sort of the production to just the guests and the conversations that you're holding. So I just feel incredibly honored and humbled to be in this space, to be amongst the thought leaders that you've had before. And I just appreciate you creating this space for voices like mine and many others to kind of reach an audience that maybe we wouldn't have had access to otherwise. So again, I just want to give you your flowers and flowers to your team. And just say thank you, on behalf of all of us who appreciate the conversations and, the thoughts and everything like that and the work that you do. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And now I'm gonna try to not cry while you tell us who you are.
I think it's
Okay.
important. I think we it's Black History Month, and I don't know when this will be aired, but Black history is every day in my opinion. So I think it's important that we recognize the work that's being done out of the community while we also honor the past. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there before we got started.
Thank you so much.
Of
Truly
course.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, by way of introductions, I do a bit of an inclusive introduction. So, my name is Rolando Talbot. My pronouns that I use are he, him, his. I also use the pronouns we, us, and ours, really out of recognition of the collectivism in this work that we do when it comes to inclusion. So you'll hear me sort of interchangeably sometimes, if I'm referring to myself, change those pronouns up, and that's really all that's about. But I do identify as an African American person, as a person that was also assigned male at birth. For those who might benefit from a visual description who are watching us, I am of medium complexion, have short black hair. I'm wearing glasses today so I can see the screen clearly. And I'm wearing one of my favorite shirts, which is sort of an olive color shirt that has the word neurodiversity in yellow on the front of it. And that is because I do identify as an autistic person who also experiences ADHD. We say it sort of affectionately as AUDHD, which is like AU for autism and HD or DHD for our ADHD. So we call it AUDHD. But I do believe in identity first language. So you'll hear me refer to myself as an autistic person. Um, and then I also just want to recognize too that I'm holding this conversation on the land of the Gabrielino and Tongva nations, and so I do a lot of work in ensuring that I pay respect to the land that we sit on, and also ensuring that they one day hopefully get their land back. So again, just thank you for a moment to introduce myself, and thank you for allowing me to be here today.
Absolutely. I'm sitting here like with chills. So thank you for that. I wanted us to really talk about what organizations are doing now when it comes to how do we do this inclusion thing without it being a checkbox, without it being um, something that we are told we have to do, versus what, this is something that's in our values, this is something that is a part of our mission, this is, quote unquote, as I always say, this is something written on our cafeteria wall. How do we actualize what that looks like? And I'm asking this, and I'm glad that you um, highlighted your identities in this space, because I think that's important, and it touches so many places and spaces that organizations may see but may not understand, and how to make things inclusive. And so I want to start kind of with that question, and we can go a little bit deeper. But how do they start to actualize what inclusion looks like?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll try to be brief, but we can definitely go down the rabbit hole if there's anything I say. So I feel as if I have a bit of a nuance and contextual sort of perspective on this, because I think there's a lot of things that we have to unpack in order to get to the root of what you're asking, and then break that all apart, pull it all apart, and then build it back up. And I think a lot of what you're asking for requires us to kind of take a look back in history, really, for the moment that we're in, look at post-pandemic and sort of post-George Floyd moment, and look at kind of what has happened since that those things occurred, what's the moment that we're in now, and really have, in a lot of ways, in my opinion, some really honest conversations about the moment that we're in, and then what is required to get to the point that you're talking about, but also recognizing that that's a process. Everything that we saw didn't happen overnight. What we're experiencing right now when it comes to inclusion and the attacks on it didn't happen overnight. So we also have to look at how we build a solution that isn't just a reaction that's put in overnight, but that is actually intentional and takes some time. To unpack it a little bit, I think for people like you and myself, I've been doing inclusion work now for 20 years. We've seen the evolution. We know history. We know that when it comes to this type of work, there's moments where this work is thriving, and then there's moments where this work is under attack, and then it comes back. We know the history is cyclical in that nature. I feel what makes this moment different, and where it really gets to the heart of what you're asking, and like, what do we do about it, is I feel like in this moment that we're at, what has been different, at least in my experience, post-pandemic and post-George Floyd, was this idea that we needed to bring the concepts of inclusion forward in a lot of more sort of demonstrable sort of ways. And in that, while it was beautiful to see the floodgates open and anybody and everybody who had any interest in inclusion came into that space to do the work, I think what we collectively have now realized was that a lot of that work was very surface level. A lot of that work was meant to meet a moment, to meet a need, to meet a concern, to meet a business proposition, whatever it was. And has now, as the tides have shifted, as attacks on things like inclusion have become more prominent, we see a lot of people abandoning that. And again, this is probably a product of just the way my brain works, but I really look at that and I have to interrogate it and sit with it for a little bit and think to myself and say, okay, would this ever happen in a finance sort of situation, right? If I was an organization that had finance, would I ramp up finance because of something that happened and then just simply abandon it? Probably not. HR functions, probably the same thing, or communications functions. So when I look at it from that lens, and I have to ask myself the question of like, well, why is inclusion, why is the work of DEI different? What happened? How do people see it differently? And that has taken me years to kind of figure out. And what I've come to sort of realize and understand is that in that moment, in that moment of addressing the pandemic, in that moment of addressing what was going on in George Floyd, we again, that's my pronouns, we as a community didn't take the necessary steps to codify inclusion in the same way that we do any other business function. We looked at it as an add-on, a bolt-on,
Yes,
like we've got to put this on. And so now we're reeling from the effects of it. So I think we just have to be honest and really look in the mirror and say, you know, we could have done things a lot differently that would have avoided the moment that we're in. So then the question is what do we do about it now? Which gets to your question. And I think the moment that I'm really focused on now amongst all the sort of different spectrums when it comes to inclusion is really making this concept of inclusion tied directly to the business functions in a way in which to abandon it would actually cause the business to fail. So going back to something like finance, right? If we were to get rid of a finance department today, your business would collapse, right? Right? Or even if you try to transition that in there, it would take years in order to do so. And I want to figure out ways, and I have done ways of making inclusion that critical to the business where it becomes a core component of what the business is. So it's not a slogan anymore. It's not a poster. It's not an, a pop-up event with cultural. It's none of that anymore. It's an actual piece of the business that is seen as critical. And there's a lot of different ways that we can do it. I talk a lot about it in my writing, but that's really, I think, the moment that we need right now is finding ways of making inclusion embedded into the business as a piece of its DNA, as a piece of just that you cannot be successful without. And that's really where I think we can kind of get back to this part. And then the one last thing I'll say about it, and I'll pause, is I also think, and there is a part of me in the work that I do where I try to be a little bit of provocative and kind of think outside the box when it comes to inclusion. We haven't talked too much about my background, but I am a veteran. I served in the military for 12 years. And I bring a lot of that experience to my work, a lot of the mindset, a lot of the things that I've learned when I was in the military. And when I look at the moment that we're in right now, and I look at the attacks on inclusion, and I look at the rollback and things like that, I have to recognize that this was a very coordinated effort. The moment that we're in right now took years to formulate, took years to implement, and we need a counterattack. I developed on my Substack, I developed what I called basically the art of war when it comes to inclusion. So if you know anything about the art of war by Sun Tzu, it's something that we use in a lot of military doctrines, and it was text to talk about how to fight wars effectively, humanely, those types of things. I really felt the need to develop something like that, but from inclusion that looked at both proactive and reactive ways to basically push back against the onslaught of inclusion. And I think we need to get that sort of, for lack of a better term, militant about inclusion, because those who are fighting against it are 10 toes deep in that work of creating inclusion. So we have to meet that energy. And so I talk a lot about how to do it in ways that obviously drive the business forward if you're working in an institution, or drive your organizational goals forward, but do so in a relentless and in some cases sort of ruthless sort of way, because I feel like
unapologetically
right now. But
no, I mean, you're speaking my language. That's why I was like, yes, because I think I absolutely agree that the superficial, I often say the reason why we are where we are right now is because of the superficial stuff, right? That's what got a lot of promotion. It was this very check the box. And it needs, like, DEI needs to be part of the DNA. So absolutely, when you said that, I was like, yes, because it is not an appendage. The other piece, and I was actually going back through some old podcast episodes that we had, and it was a conversation I had with a guest around, we have to think about this as almost like a lung replacement or a heart replacement surgery. You can't just put an organ in from somebody into it. You have to prepare the body for it. And so when we think about inclusion, when we think about we're adding something new, how are we preparing the environment for that new organ? And so with inclusion, what happened was like, oh, we don't want to be, seen as a bad organization. We're just going to throw this in here. And it was not connected to other parts of the business. Even in my experience, when I was in corporate, one of the reasons why I left was I've been doing this inclusion work for most of my career in some way, shape, or form. And I got reorged into HR because the mindset was DEI should only come from HR. And I'm like, I have a marketing background, right? I was leading inclusive marketing. Most people that I've talked to have come from a marketing or communications background that see this more holistically, see it from the business perspective, because we're not just looking at employees, but we're also looking at how is this impacting customers and clients, products and how they're being made, all of these things, all of these aspects of the business. So when you said that, yes, 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 because it is absolutely a part of every aspect of how a business should function. And excuse me, as we are seeing these organizations really think about a shift into, yeah, this is good. This makes good business sense. Well, all the data says that diversity makes good business sense, that inclusion makes good business sense. So you're going to be scared into getting rid of it and hurt your bottom line? Make it make sense to me, because that doesn't make sense. All of the data proves that when an organization has these functions or this work in place, it's overall better for the business bottom line. So, I think there's a lot of that. I have to read your Substack on the art of war and inclusion, because I think that there is this, and I've shared this on the podcast before. I've always been a firm believer in, you have to speak up, like you have to use your voice. Even in corporate, I was part of a internal group. We called ourselves the Burn It Down crew, because we were like, the only way something is going to change is if we burn this down, and we're going to have to burn it down from the inside out. But like a phoenix, we will have to rise from the ashes. We can't just burn it down and leave it there. So I love that you've combined kind of the art of war and inclusion, because we have to have that mindset. And I think there were so many. I was talking to, as a matter of fact, I'm recording another episode with Dr. Janice Gassamarsari soon. And we were talking about how when it got hard, how many people ran away. And I'm like, that's the ebbs and flows. Like, this work ebbs and flows. And so if you're coming in just when it's good, and then when it's not good, we don't see, or like, maybe you shouldn't have been in the space to begin with. Right.
No.
So
yeah.
But we could have a whole other conversation.
Can I just pick up on that point that you made, that last one? And I'm super excited about the conversation we have with Dr. Jana. It's interesting, because when I talk to senior leaders about that point, and they talk about, it's difficult and the culture, blah, 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 blah. And I'm looking and I'm like, you're running multi-million-dollar businesses. That can't be easy. You do hard stuff every day, right? Like, you do hard stuff every day. I said, we have to get out of this mindset that, again, and you said it so eloquently earlier, that this isn't the bolt-on. This is part of your core function. This should be part of your core value of inclusion. Like you said, the data is there. So again, we have to get out of this mindset. We have to figure out a way to get out of this mindset of looking at this work as a nice to have, as a bolt-on, as something that's like, oh, it's great. Like, we have to find ways, and we have to be relentless about that in connecting it to the business, or connecting it to your overall mission or values, to say that this is absolutely critical. Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. But what in running your business is, right? So we need to kind of get out of this mindset that this is something else, this is something other, and really get back to, really driving that value proposition, whether it be one from a business standpoint or even a morality standpoint, and really help organizations understand that this is part of the DNA. You remove it, your DNA ceases to exist. So like we've got to start thinking about it in those terms for sure. But
Yeah.
that's such a great point.